South Africa ended up becoming my favorite stop of the voyage so far. But before we even reached its shores, I found myself learning about nuclear disarmament, apartheid, Japanese-Korean reconciliation, and hearing stories from people who have dedicated their lives to making the world a little better. Then came elephants, penguins, dramatic coastlines, and one of the most beautiful places I've ever seen. This is our journey from Madagascar to South Africa aboard Peaceboat. After leaving Madagascar, we spent 4 days crossing the Indian Ocean towards South Africa. South Africa has about 65 million people and has the biggest economy on the African continent. Over the next few days, we'd visit Gqeberha and Cape Town. But before we reached the shores, there was a lot happening on board Peaceboat. Life on the ship was busy as always. One of the highlights was celebrating New Year Japanese style. The celebrations began with a traditional ceremony where the oldest passenger aboard, aged 94, together with one of the youngest passengers, opened a sake barrel. There were games, performances, and plenty of laughter. One game sounded incredibly easy. Place the eyes, nose, mouth, and cheeks correctly on a face. The catch? You had to do it blindfolded. I also had the chance to wear a traditional kimono. Men's kimonos are usually darker colors, such as black, navy, or gray, while women's are often much more colorful. Traditional silk kimonos can be very expensive. A lighter and more affordable version, made from cotton, is known as a yukata. One thing I didn't expect before joining Peaceboat was how much I would actually learn on board. Peaceboat is so much more than just transportation. It's a floating university, it's a conference center, and a cultural exchange program all rolled into one. We attended a presentation about the history of Peaceboat. As I talked about in an earlier video, the organization began in 1983 during the Cold War, when a group of young Japanese people wanted to see the world with their own eyes and build connections across borders. More than 40 years later, over 80,000 people have traveled with Peaceboat to more than 200 ports around the world. Along the way, the organization has participated in humanitarian projects, promoted the UN Sustainable Development Goals, worked with youth from conflict regions, for example, bringing Israeli and Palestinians together, or working with Ukrainian ambassadors, and supporting educational programs around the world. One particularly inspiring exhibit displayed the 2017 Nobel Peace Prize awarded to ICANN, the international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons. Peaceboat serves on the steering committee of ICANN. Another organization closely connected with Peaceboat, Nihon Hidankyo, received the Nobel Peace Prize in 2024 for its advocacy towards a world free of nuclear weapons. They, for example, had hibakusha, survivors of atomic bombs, travel with Peaceboat across the world to share their stories. Seeing these projects reminded me that, while history is often remembered through conflicts and wars, there are countless people who dedicated their lives to reconciliation, dialogue, and peace. Some of the most memorable experiences happened inside lecture halls rather than during excursions. I attended talks on nuclear disarmament, atomic bomb survivors, Korean-Japanese relations, South African history, and the San people of Southern Africa. Today, there are roughly 10,000 nuclear weapons held by 9 countries around the world. And only half of all countries in the world have signed the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. Another memorable guest was rapper, entertainer, author, award-winning master juggler Chang-Haeng. His performances were incredible, but his personal story was equally powerful. Growing up in Japan with Korean roots, he spoke about discrimination and bullying he experienced growing up. his story highlighted how historical conflicts can continue to affect people's lives long after political events have ended. Life on board wasn't all lectures. We also enjoyed a passenger-led New Year's concert, a birthday celebration for a passenger who had already completed 11 peaceboat voyages, and a talent show where people got remarkably creative. Another Japanese guest speaker shared her story of falling in love with African wildlife and becoming a safari guide, which was very interesting given our upcoming safari. We arrived in Gqeberha. If you're wondering how to pronounce that name properly, which I'm trying my best to do, it involves a click sound from the Xhosa language. It was formerly known as Port Elizabeth, which reflects its colonial history. The renaming is part of a broader effort to reclaim indigenous languages and identities throughout South Africa. Before arriving, we had attended several lectures by Janet Jobson, a super inspiring CEO of the Desmond and Leah Tutu Legacy Foundation. I really enjoyed her lectures. Her talks provided important context for understanding modern South Africa. South Africa abolished apartheid only a few decades ago. The country transformed itself with a new constitution, a new flag, a new anthem, and recognition of 12 official languages. Yet, many challenges remain. Youth unemployment remains extremely high, and the inequalities created during apartheid can still be seen today, in, for example, the educational differences and gated communities right next to poor neighborhoods. The more I learned about South African history, the more impressive I found its transformation. The country is still facing major challenges, but the effort it puts in making a multicultural democracy after apartheid is remarkable. We watched a documentary on Desmond Tutu's life. He had a few quotes that especially stayed with me. Do your little bit of good where you are. It's those little bits of good put together that overwhelm the world. Another lesson he taught was that leadership is service, and that forgiveness, much like swimming, can only be learned by actually doing it. With Peaceboat's tour, we walked through the city of Gqeberha and touched through layers of history. One of the landmarks we visited was Duncan's Memorial. The pyramid was built in 1820 by Sir Ruthven Duncan in memory of his wife Elizabeth, who died in India in 1818 at the age of just 27. She is the Elizabeth that later gave the city the name Port Elizabeth. We also got to climb the lighthouse for views across the city, and we could even see Peaceboat from there. Additionally, we had a short visit of Fort Frederick, built by the British in 1799 to defend the colony from possible French attack. Okay, enough history for a moment. We came to Africa, so it's finally time to see some amazing wildlife. I spent the day exploring Adobe Elephant National Park, and it did not disappoint. Seeing elephants in the wild never gets old. Neither does watching zebras roam freely across the landscape. For many visitors, this is the Africa they dream about seeing. Between Gqeberha and Cape Town, we had just one day at sea. One memorable event involved an event I co-hosted. Together with a 13-year-old, I co-hosted an intergenerational dialogue session. We paired people from different generations and gave them conversation prompts. The discussions were fascinating. It's amazing how much people can learn from one another and really connect, when they simply take the time to listen. I was very excited to see Cape Town. I had heard lots about it before, but I'd never been there before myself. Expectations were high, but honestly, they were exceeded. One of the first things that caught my attention was the language. As a Dutch speaker, I could understand quite a lot of Afrikaans because the two languages are closely related. I joined the tour along the coast, and the scenery quickly became spectacular. Rocky cliffs, white beaches, blue oceans stretching to the horizon, and even penguins. Before we reached the Cape, our local tour guide gave us a warning. Don't take any food with you in your bag. Don't leave any food unattended. Why? Because the local baboons there are known to help themselves to tourist lunches. Thankfully, we managed to keep our belongings and actually didn't see any baboons on the way. Eventually, we reached the Cape, the southwestern tip of the African continent, and one of the most breathtaking places I have ever visited. I visited a lot of beautiful places during this journey and in my life in general. But looking across the ocean from the Cape, honestly, the scenery was just spectacular. Blue water on both sides, white beaches below, massive cliffs, mountain silhouettes in the distance, the exciting feeling of standing at the edge of a continent. Yet, like much of South Africa, Cape Town is a place of contrasts. While speaking with a doctor, he told me he regularly treats victims of gang violence. It was a sobering reminder that even the most beautiful places often face serious social challenges. Later, we spent time exploring the waterfront and enjoying views of Table Mountain, with clouds draped across its summit. It was a spectacular way to end our visit. Of all the ports we had visited so far, Cape Town had impressed me the most. South Africa just has amazing wildlife, fascinating history, inspiring people, and some of the most spectacular scenery I'd ever seen in my life. But more than anything, I'll remember the stories. Stories of reconciliation, stories of resilience, and stories of people working to build a better future. Next stop, Namibia.